Hello and welcome back to Redefine Parenting. I'm your host, Veenu Keller, and I want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and Her Network on Zingo TV's channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Tonight we have a very special guest. Her name is Lindsay Ellis, and she is a Trials into Triumph specialist and the founder of Live Empowered, with several different certifications in leadership development, health, fitness, positive psychology. I was really excited to get the opportunity to meet Lindsay because she has, I'm going to call it her secret power, her superpower, is understanding family core values and bringing them into the family. And one thing that, Lindsay and I got on at this great conversation. I think, Lindsay, we were on the phone for more than an hour because I think we could have just kept going, just kind of feeding off each other, how important it is that we are starting to empower the parents to be better parents, to have that an even deeper bond with their kids. Like right now, it's more crucial than ever. I grew up in a time where, I grew up as a latchkey kid with my brother. My mom worked 2 jobs, put herself through law school. It's kind of like us kids were raising each other. Some parents were home. Some people looked after us. But basically, we were there to learn our own life lessons. And, now, especially after COVID, what I have seen is that kids have really lost connection. They've lost connection to the world. They've lost connection in person. They've lost connection even to family, because I don't know about you, Lindsay, but I still had to work during COVID, and so the kids were off doing what they needed to do. Thank God my husband was here to, support them through the transitions, what they were going through. But honestly, I was working through it. So I think right now, this show couldn't come at a more amazing, perfectly time. So without further ado, Lindsay, welcome to the show, Redefine Parenting.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So let's just go ahead and dive in and maybe just give a little bit of background to our listeners all over the world, by the way, and just kind of tell us, like, how did you get into realizing, like, this is a must for families? Like, we have got to start at the basics, and that's the core values.
Yeah. So I worked in corporate for years, and for about 15 years. And for the last portion of my corporate career, I was doing a lot with core values in the businesses that I was working with. And so when I left, and during that time, I had realized that my own personal core values, I happened to be negotiating every single day for what I felt was most important in the moment. So for instance, family might be family is a core value of mine. And after dinner, my son would run over, play with his wrestlers, and put on the TV show. And I would look up and see that he was fine. So I would pick up my phone and start going through text messages, planning my day, do all the things. Well, when I looked back and I saw that, well, wait a minute, if that was my family time and I spent my family time doing those things and he was doing those things, was that really connection? Was I actually living my value? Was he getting a value? Where was the connection in all that? And so that was a life changer for me. That's when I started to develop this whole core value concept and really figuring out what it really looks like to live it, give it, and receive it, and how to apply it into your life. And so I knew it worked for corporations. I knew it worked for myself because my life did a 180 after a year. I mean, I'm talking a 180. And COVID hit. And things were chaotic. Things were crazy. We were all adjusting to brand new things around our world, right? And one of them happened to be we were all under the same roof at the same time, 24/7. So I just started thinking one day, I said, if it works for corporations and it works for my life, why would it not work for family? And family is just like an organization, So I started to compare the two, do parallel things. And I created this like family values, a rough draft of a family values workshop. And I just had my family all go through. And so we just kind of played this game and everybody kind of picked out what their values were. And I walked them through how to figure out what their values are. And then we just started talking about them, like what it means to them, what it means to live them, give them, and receive them. And then I put it on the wall, and I printed out this picture because this is my wall, and this is all the Post-it notes. And this is from 2020, and it's still on my wall.
Love it. Love it.
And we just kept it with post-it notes, nice and rough, like, on the wall. But I found so many times, like, things would get out of order, or one of us would be, for instance, my son, digital learning, he would be having a blast, right? But he was disrupting the teacher, disrupting the class, but in his eyes, he was having fun. And that was one of his core values. And so the rule became like, I walked him over to the wall and I said, are you having trouble getting any of this? Are you having trouble giving it or understanding anything? And then I said, tell me about class today. And he's like, oh, it was so fun. And I said, was the teacher having fun? He goes, ooh. And I said, was the other students having fun? He's like, probably not. I said, okay, so in order for it to be a value, everybody has to be feeling it. And that's when I said, do we think that we might need to like reevaluate, where are you living your values? And he is like, probably not. And so it just gave instead of me yelling at him and telling him not to do that or stop, settle down or pay attention, I brought him back around to his own, like what was important to him and what fed him. And it's just stuck. And it just evolved from there. So that was when he was 9. We redid it again this past year, and his values look a lot different, but to see the difference, it's just been so amazing. And it's been a world of difference in our family.
I love that. So let's just kind of back up a little bit, because it's like even my daughter was saying today when I was just telling you that my son, I have twins, and my son always says, Mom, I'm your number one rating fan. And he's so excited. My show's now on 8:00 on Thursday nights so he can watch it. And my daughter's like, oh, who's your guest? Who's your guest? And I said, oh, it's this lady named Lindsay. We're going to talk about family values. And so my husband looks at her and he's like, so Sage, so what's your values? And she's like, well, I mean, I do get mad and angry. And we're like, no. So, even if kids don't know what a value is, how do they live by it, right? How do they give it? How do they receive it if they don't even know what it is? And I want to take a stab in saying that probably some adults don't even know what values are. So by your definition and your meaning, who has created this, the core of family values, what would you identify a value as?
That's a great question. And the easiest way to put it is a value is something that without it, you cannot be your best self. There's a quote, when the roots are deep, there's no reason to fear the wind. So think about a tree or a hurricane even, right? The hurricane comes through and those palm trees. I even told my husband one time when we were watching the news, I was like, man, if I was a tree, I'd want to be a palm tree, because like the winds come through and nothing, like They're still standing at the end of it and everything else around it is in shambles, right? And so, and when the roots are deep, or in a palm trees, they go wide, then there's no reason to fear the wind. And I feel like when your foundation is so rooted and you know who you are and what's important to you, then it's easy to like refocus yourself. And so that's the best way for me to describe it. I also would like to describe it as your roadmap.
Right. I love that, as your roadmap. So is that how you explain it to your son at 9? Because he's 9, right? So when you're coming out and you're like, hey, we're going to sit down and look at our values, is that kind of how you explained it to him?
It was more about like what is most important to you. Like when you feel this, like when you hear this word, and I just gave him a bunch of words, and you have access to my free download, but of the words that I use. And so when they look at it, I just ask, in the way that I do things, most people will tell you to take the list of words and pull your words out, and then narrow it down, and then narrow it down, and then narrow it down. And I don't love that version. The version that I recreated is where you pull out all of your words and then you group them together. So for instance, this is my son's, one of his cards, and like it has like kindness is one of them. And then all of these words represent kindness for him. So they're all of the values that he picked, and then he put them in buckets. So kindness is the one that just represents this bucket of words. And that way it kind of gives him a clear idea, and all of us a clear idea of how that represents. So kindness to him is open-mindedness. motivation, helpfulness, inspiration, humor, and positivity.
I love it.
Yeah. And then that way it kind of kindness is what represents all of those words. And then we start to envision. So how do you know that you might be living in kindness? How do you know that you've received kindness? And how do you know when you're not? And when he can actually put, vision to that, it's so much easier for children and adults to actually realize when they're living them and when they're forgetting them.
I love that. Like one of the things that I do with my twins when I take them to school is right before we get to school or along the way of the school drive, I always ask them, what kind of day are you going to have? And I've been doing this since they can talk, like at preschool. And so we started out when they were like 2.5, but I'm going to have a Ninja Turtle day and I'm going to have a Princess day. And so I would say, what does a Ninja Turtle day look like to you? And he would explain it. And he would say, well, it's listening, it's paying attention, it's being nice. And my son's like, it's not throwing your shoes at the teacher, because there was one day he threw his shoes at the teacher. So it was great that he was able to describe it. Almost like what you're saying is that there was a visual of what that looked like. So when I picked him up from preschool, I'd say, how was your Ninja Turtle day? Were you able to have that day? And if he said, yes, it was a great Ninja Turtle day. So how did you do your Ninja Turtle day? And he would tell me. So now there are different words like I'm going to have a good day, or I'm going to have a great day, extraordinary day, amazing day. But I always ask them, what does that look like? And it's funny because my daughter now, especially when I don't take them to school and my husband does, she'll come home and she'll say, Mom, what kind of day did you have? And I'll tell her, and she's like, so what did that look like to you today?
Love it. I love it.
And on the way to school, when I do take them, after they've done it and we're waiting in the car line for them to drop off, she'll say, so what kind of day are you going to have? And my day is normally a productive day. I'm going to have a productive day. Well, what does that look like to you? And I tell her. And so what's great is that it's the modeling of setting our day off within the intention of what that looks like, and I feel like it's kind of a caveat to what you're talking about. It's, I do it daily. However, I like what you're saying. It's like, figure out what drives you, and I always tell people when I work on values, because I work on that with my clients as well, I'll say a value is something that lights you up and is your beam of light. If you are a lighthouse, it guides you, right? It guides you to your home, your emotional home, like who you are. What's guiding you to be who you are? What's guiding you to be the best version of you in that moment? That's how I describe it. But I think it's very synonymous to what you're saying. I love the fact that you have these words on a spreadsheet so people can pick them out, because I even think that even as an adult, when I'm doing any type of worksheet, when I have to think about, what do I want my goals to be? And I'm thinking, I don't know. What do I want my goals to be? It's so hard. But when someone says, well, think of the life wheel, think of finances, career, relationship, health, spirituality. Now I could be like, oh, okay. So my health goal is this. My financial goal is this. My career goal is this. And it just makes it easier by having kind of like a category or an area to look at. So I'm curious, when you do family values, does everyone have their own, or is there like a theme for the family and the family picks what's important as a family?
Yes. And first, I love what you're doing and what you're saying. And I love the Ninja Turtle Day, because what a great way to do that with especially the younger kids, to get them in that mindset to where they're noticing, because a lot of the issues right now is that we just we just don't notice anymore. We stop noticing. We're in routine over and over again. So when you put intention to it and you know what it looks like, I think that's beautiful. And especially for those younger kids, it sets them up for success when they're older. And this lighthouse and this compass, what you were talking about, it is so important, because you cannot be your best self unless you're lit up. That's what we call like constantly living from an empty cup. when you're giving, and that's where things get tough, especially when you're going from one thing to another, like I say, from home to work, and maybe your work values don't match your home values, and eventually, because you do spend so much time at work, you bring those home with you, and your family values or your own values kind of go away a little bit or get tucked under. That's why it's really important to know your own. And
Yeah.
so when it does come to family values, back to your question, everybody does have their own. But when you put them together, a lot of the times what you'll find is families, teams, like you will notice that a lot of people will have some of the same values. They might look different to each one. And, for family, that might just be family members for one person, and family to somebody else might be those close friends, those people that they let into their network, right? Along with the family members. So as long as they know and you kind of know, but you'll kind of couple them together. So when a group of people value the same thing, like family, then it's easy for them. It's the ones that they don't have alike that you almost want to adopt even more, because you need to recognize that in the other. So when I look at family values, yes, it's a big compass, but and you pick the ones that you really operate off of, but it really is just a culture. Family values, to me, it becomes the culture in which families communicate and understand each other.
Right. I like that. I mean, we've always had a family theme. Like I heard about family themes years ago, and so I incorporated that. Like, what is our family theme? And the twins at the time were really young, and my older boys had already moved out, and my stepdaughters came every other weekend. So it was kind of up like me and my husband. Like, what is it that we want our house to encompass? If there was a theme that was the umbrella of our house, what would it be? And we both came up with love and kindness. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is our theme. And we've always used that, like even to this day, when the twins have this love hate relationship. Sometimes it's more hate than love, but we remind them in that moment is, are you showing love and kindness right now? And a lot of times it's, no, I'm not. And I'm angry. Okay, great. But I need you to recognize, like it's taking ownership of where you're at and checking in with yourself.
Right.
Before you keep this behavior going and before you're trying to hurt your sister more or hurt your brother more, you need to recognize that you're not living under what we talk about as love and kindness. And it's funny because if me and my husband are having a disagreement, they'll call that out too. They'll be like, are we being love and kindness? It's like, time to check in, right? It's time to check in if we're being that. One of the things that you said about living your best life, my co-host on my other show, Live Now with Veenu and Chuck says, you can live your best life and not be the best you, but when you are the best you, you're living your best life. And I love that he says that, because again, everything can be going great. Life is great. Your work is great. Your family's great. And then when you're checking in with yourself, you're not being great. You've somehow skipped over some of those values. Maybe it's your integrity. Maybe, you're having a little bit of imposter syndrome. Maybe, you're trying to scheme out of this to get this, it's so important to check in with the best you. And I think that comes back to understanding what are our core values. And I think as us parents, it's really important that we have them first, that we are checking in with ourselves, because like you said, in order to be the best you have to know what your values are. What's driving that? What's the pull that pulls you towards being the best you? And the pull should be those values. Like for me, it's always been honesty and respect as top values to me. But it's interesting because I think that even with something so positive like that, there could be a double-edged sword. Because if honesty and respect are my top two, I shouldn't say they're always my top. They're not my top two now, but they had started out that way. Everything was, are you being honest though? Like it was almost, I was looking to make sure everyone was being honest with me. And then somebody did something, I'm like, they're not respectful. So, they're not my people because they're not respecting me, And it goes to show you that when you put things at the top, they really do lead you. And although it was a check-in for me to make sure I'm honest, make sure I'm respectful, it still was not serving me as being my top two. And so, I had to change it. I had to change it to like kindness. I had to change it to love. I had to change it to, connection, like valuing connection over the honesty.
That is so good.
And it literally changes things.
I love that you bring up that perspective of, what you were saying about the respect and honesty. And if they're not giving it back to you, then they're not your people, because that can be a really, really hard thing. And I think that that's why core values kind of go out the window so easily sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I get so passionate about bringing it back, because it is important to know what you need in order to thrive. But it's also important for you to figure out what that looks like and how to communicate it, how to lead by example, and so when we look at love or honesty or respect, I love that you realized that you had to change it because it was actually pulling you down more than it was like pulling you up. But
Right.
you changed it and you still value those things, but it's kind of in that bucket of kindness and that bucket of love. And so it represents that. And I love that. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say it's 100%. You're right, because if I love you, I want to respect you. I don't want to disrespect you. If I love you, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to show up with pure integrity to be with you, and if I receive your love, I feel respected. I feel that you're honest with me because we have that safe space to be able to share. I think that with my friends, I think that with my kids, I think that with my husband, so.
And I think right now more than ever, just to be honest, and I heard you talking about it before in past episodes, but right now more than ever, we need to go back into this, what it looks like to communicate, what it looks like to have conversations, and what better place to have it in a family setting where you can actually verbalize what something means to you, what it looks like, and have that safe space where families get to actually have conversations. I love that your daughter's like, so what does that look like, Mom?
Right.
Because it really is a good conversation starter instead of, hey, how was your day? It was good. Okay.
Well, that's why, right? Because it's one of the things, like working with families so much, is like that's the biggest part that is the disconnect of the harmony of the family.
Yeah.
People want peace and balance. And I say, well, what's peace and balance? It's harmony. It's how everything from us, from my work life, from my kids, their school life, how do we bring it together and harmonize this in our family? It's by respecting the space. It's by understanding we have different spaces and things that we have to do. And sometimes there's frustration in it. And it's being able to come out and talk about it. Like, okay, you're frustrated. I could see that. What do you need? And my husband asked this great question to them, like when they're really frustrated, it's, what do you need from me to support you right now?
It's a good one.
Because you getting frustrated at me and staying frustrated with me is digging you a deeper hole because you're being disrespectful. You're definitely not listening. Your emotions are so high. So you're definitely not thinking about the consequences that are going to happen. And to be honest, I don't really want to be next to you right now because you're being very ugly. And I value me too much to just sit here and take it. So, and it was just a constant thing. So he finally said, you just got to ask him the question. It's like, what do you need right now to feel differently? What do you need right now from me to help you feel differently? And if it's, I don't know, then go to your room, not for a timeout, to have space, a safe space to think about what do I need. And when you know it, come on out. We don't say go into your room for 5 minutes. Oh, you're 11, go to your room for 11 minutes. We don't do timeouts. We've never done timeouts ever. But we've also let them know that their room is their safe space, that they have that safe space to cry, to yell, to be angry, to be happy, to celebrate, because it's your safe space. And when you're ready to come and share that, the thoughts that you've had, I'll be ready to hear you whenever that is. If it takes you an hour, then it takes you an hour. If it takes you 30 seconds, then it takes you 30 seconds. It's giving them the opportunity to do a self check-in and to learn self-control. But it's also teaching them that I value me. We talk about self-worth. We talk about self-esteem. How do we teach this to our kids? We have to role model that. Like, I value me too much to have you as 11-year-old yelling at me. I'm sorry, I don't know who you're talking to at that moment when you're yelling at me, And we've actually in our house started to say tone. So if my tone, if their tone, and it's a free space to say, as long as it's not done in a rude manner.
Right.
It's tone, because sometimes the person who's saying it comes out in a tonality that we're not even aware of,
Yeah.
because maybe we're frustrated or feel rushed and we just need to say what we need to say. And then person who's receiving it is like, whoa, whoa, how do I defend it now? And all of a sudden they're defensive. We're like, why are you being this defensive? All I was saying is like, but it didn't come that way. Oh, so now instead of going through that long thing, it's like tone, hello, tone, mind your tone. So it's just a check in, because we're trying to find, as a family, especially as our twins get older, we have 6 kids from 29 to 11-year-old twins. We're trying to figure out what's the balance so we can be harmony in our house, so we can have that love and kindness, and it's not a constant battle.
I love everything you're saying, and I get so excited. I just like want to jump in my chair right now because it's stuff that I preach as well. It's like, and that with my son, his room is his safe space. Go upstairs and just take a couple deep breaths,
Yeah.
and it never fails. 5 minutes, he comes out and he's like, okay, but we all have to do that and we have to give that. And so I can't reiterate that enough for everybody that's listening, because that is such an amazing practice to allow each other to find space. Because at the end of the day, we are modeling for our kids. We are modeling. So if we are getting angry and frustrating and in reaction mode with them, with people around us on the phone, driving a car, they are watching. And so allow yourself to like model, but also open up that safe space where everybody makes mistakes, and know where you have to go to get into a better space so it doesn't keep on going. And I love it. I love what you're saying. And it does come back full circle when it comes to core values, because again, they're your compass. And if you know what you value, decisions become easier. If you know, and when it comes to family values, yes, you can pick like 3 or 4 values. And if you're a young family, yes, the parents should pick them. If you're doing this when you're an older with older teenagers or tweens, maybe it becomes a discussion on what represents our family. How do we do this, as a family? But it allows us to be in check. And when we are frustrated, and because nobody's perfect, no family is perfect. Everybody's going to have those moments when there's confrontation, and arguments are healthy, right? That is a healthy thing for people to see, or your kids to see. I like using a safe word, right? Because when you talk about tone, I'm kind of giggling a little bit, because we do this often in my house, and I know that in the moment of high frustration, if somebody were to say to me, your tone, it might make me a little bit, it could go either way. It depends on how the reactionary, person is saying your tone, So we came up with like safe words like cheese biscuit, whatever that is, cheese biscuit or beans or whatever, and it's something that's lighthearted. And I give this tip out often, but like when you're starting to feel like tensions are getting tough, or maybe you want the other person to kind of take a check because you're starting to get defensive and you're not really sure what you did wrong, but we just need to take a minute. Just throwing out that word, it allows it to be an icebreaker where nobody has to feel like they're being confrontational to each other. And a lot of the times there's some personalities in my family that don't necessarily like to speak up, right? Because they don't like confrontation. And that's perfectly fine, because we're all different personalities. But a safe word might be easier.
Yeah, I love that, because it's also a pattern interrupt. So if we're having an argument and all of a sudden you went cheese biscuits, I'm like, what cheese biscuits? So it creates that space for positive change, right? And then you're able to say, I was trying to hear what you're saying, and yet I felt kind of defensive, because I don't know if you're mad at me, or if what you're just saying is like frustrating to you. And then that gives that person a time to be like, oh, no, it's not you. It's just the situation that happened. Or I am mad because this is the way I took what you said to me and it made me frustrated. So it just gives that space to make that correction, like a course correction, if you would. I love what one of our listeners said: give children a healthy marriage between their dad and mom so that children can grow into a healthy adult. And I love that, because lately that's been a core thing also that I tell people, is that, a lot of parents say, well, I have to stay with my husband because of the kids, or I have to stay with my wife because of the kids. And let me tell you, your kids, our kids, get the definition of what a relationship looks like, what unconditional love looks like from watching their parents.
Yes.
It's from watching them. So if you are in an abusive relationship, is your daughter going to go get one abusive relationship because she has already, well, mom stayed, mom loves them. I see them hugging and kissing and they say, I love you, but I also see dad hit mom. So that must be how you love. Yeah. And you love enough to stay. So it's okay. And then all of a sudden your daughter's in the abusive relationship. You're like, honey, you got to get out. But who are you to tell her that? Because all she knows is that that's her definition of what a healthy, loving relationship is. So we as parents have to really check ourselves to say, are we showing up again as the best version of us in our relationship? You know, one thing that me and my husband have never really done, we've never really hid when we had our struggles or whatnot. And we tell the kids, we're like, yeah, you heard us yelling and we were upset. And yes, we love each other. And we had to figure that out when we had that disconnect. And it was kind of like, just like they had that conflict and they yell at each other. It's like someone's not being heard. And I said, but one of the things that dad and I are learning is that we both don't need to be right, that we just need to learn how to let go of the control and just hear the other person. And we explain that to them because it also gives them an opportunity to understand conflict resolution too, is that we're not always going to get it right. And my husband and I are not afraid to apologize to our kids. We're not afraid to say, hey, I was out of line. I mean, there was an incident at my son's school recently. We were all just kind of commenting about our values before we started the show. And, you know, my son had an issue at school and the way it was interpreted really put my son on the defensive. And I was like, but you did this, you know, he broke his computer screen. And he's like, but I didn't do it on purpose. The message we got really implied that he did. And I'm like, well, they've investigated, they watched the video, and his behavior escalated, like literally for 5 hours. It was like up, down, up, down. Like you knew he didn't want to be mad because he would be playful. And then all of a sudden he would just switch to upset and angry and crying. And so it was in and out of his room, like trying to figure it out. And then later on we find out that he didn't do it. He didn't do it that way, but his behavior definitely was kind of aggressive all day and very out of line. And so it made sense. My husband says that's why he was upset, because he wasn't being heard. He felt totally dismissed and nobody believed him. So the next day I apologized to him. I said, you know, I owe you an apology. And I said, what did you learn from this? And he says, I need to stop lying. And I said, tell me why that shows up for you. He's like, because if I would not lie to you, then you probably would have believed me yesterday when I told you.
Wow, what a lesson. That's incredible.
You know, I mean, it really is. And so now we have a reference for him when he's not telling the truth to check in and say, you know, you remember what happened at school and how much you wanted to be heard. Remember the lesson you learned. So I'm just asking you, is this your truth? Because I really want to believe you and I really want to support you through this. Is this your truth? And, you know, I feel like we need to, as parents, to find those references when we can to support what we want from them. You know, to say that we're never going to lie. We all tell lies here and there, whether we exaggerate the truth, whether we leave something out, whether we blatantly lie. A lie is a lie when we're not walking in our truth the whole time. And to say that we never lie, I like to say that I don't, because honesty still one of my values. Sorry, it is. And I'm sure there's times that I embellish, or there's times that I leave something out. And so, you know, to be honest, because I'm not going to lie to you, I would say that, you know, to say we're never going to lie is a lie. Like there's going to be times. However, it's learning how to walk our truth. You know, I always tell my kids, if you have to think about lying about it, it's a time to check in to say, should I be doing it?
I love that.
You know, and I have clients that right now, especially because they're teenagers, they value fun over the consequences, right? Kids right now are so afraid to miss out. And so it was interesting that you were saying that your son's value was fun. And by God, it sounded like he was having fun in that classroom that day. But I love those those questions that you ask.
Yeah.
You know, is everyone having fun? You know, are you, is it just about you having fun, or is it about everyone having fun? You know, can you tell me those 3 questions again that you ask?
Well, it is well, the rule is that if you're having fun, then everybody else has to be having fun, because a value is something that represents you, something that you want to represent as well. So not only like if you expect to receive it, you have to be willing to give it as well. So how do you live it, give it, and receive it? Is those how to be intimate with your values, for
And
sure.
that's what I thought. Yeah, live it, give it, and receive it. And I think those are 3 major conditions around a value, right? It's
Yeah.
because, and the story that you said about your son was perfect, because although he was having fun, was the class having fun? Was the teacher having fun, having to get on him, you know, the whole time? So, but I think that's what kids are valuing right now. Like, I think, especially after being locked down, you know, when the world shut down, all their fun was taken away in their minds.
Right.
And the only dopamine release they got was being on the screens.
Yeah.
And now we're saying, okay, you're on the screens too much. So now you got to get off. And it's like, wait, you want to take my fun away?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be bored. And, you know, it's funny because I've had some clients go, I just don't know how people like you and my parents even survived. I'm like, I'm sorry. And they're like, well, because you didn't have any like computers or games or anything. I'm like, we went outside. We drank from a hose. Like, we shut out and said, don't come back until dinner time.
Yeah. We built forts in the woods.
Right. We went swing. We went on the slides. We would take cold water to put on the slides because they were metal. They would be so hot.
It's just so different now. And you know, I was telling you before we started this that my son got around his passcodes for his phone. And I came up with this rule about a month ago when I realized what was going on, because I'm like, how can I do this? How can I? Because I mentioned something to him and he never like really told me. He didn't admit to it. He just kind of shrugged it off, just thinking that he was getting away with it. And so I just kind of noticed. I wanted to wait and notice. And so then I started saying, you know what the rule in my house is that if you are lying about something or you lie about something, then and you don't get caught, after 2 weeks, you have immunization and you cannot get in trouble, but you have to tell me.
Oh, I like that.
And so, and I'm like, I keep on telling him, he's like, okay. And I mean, I'm sure in his head, he was just like, why does she keep on saying this to me? But I'm asking him and telling him because he's sending me TikToks at 3 a.m. First of all, he's not supposed to have TikTok on his phone. Second of all, he's not supposed to have his phone in his room. And third of all, he's not allowed to be on his screen, you know, during those hours or for over a certain amount of time. And I'm like, why is he still sending me text messages of these TikTok videos? Like, clearly. And so I keep on asking him. And so finally we had this conversation earlier this week. And I said, my concern is that I've been telling you that you can tell me after 2 weeks. And for a month now, you've still been living this lie, because this lie is now your new truth and you don't even know what a lie is anymore. And the reason why I'm having this rule is in my house is because I never want you to feel like you have to live a lie. And I'm trying to teach you how not to. Learn how to come clean, because once you live a lie, you're building upon it. And now you're sending me TikToks at 3 a.m. because you forgot that you were lying. So when it comes full, I love how we're having these conversations, you know, where it's not yelling, it's not frustrating, because kids do want to be heard. And I think that when you come full circle, and I'm going to like switch it back here just for a minute, like we come from a completely different generation. This is the first generation where these kids have digital access. They've gone through a global pandemic where, you know, there's so much differences, but in parents, like, especially the way that I was raised is so different. And I don't know about you, but and I'm sure there's several other people out there like me where I'm just like, I don't want to be like my parents. Like, you know, and nothing against them. I didn't want to be like them. I was like, that was the one thing. Like, I didn't want to be too busy with work to where I wasn't like really home, you know? And I had great parents, don't get me wrong, but that was one of my things. And it was like that moment that I realized I was actually becoming my parents, because I was working all the time and I was just like doing my phone while he was during my family time. That was my core value. That was kind of like the wake up call for me. And so to bring it back to core values, these conversations are so crucial. One, because it's teaching kids how to think, how to have conversations, how to stick up for themselves, how to verbalize, be heard. And it's allowing you to understand your kids in a different way to where you can actually reach them and they're not hiding from you. And values in general, when you only have a roadmap that you come from and that you know, even if you want to be something else or you're working to be something else, if you don't have a roadmap for that, you're just going off of what you know you want to do, right? So, which is great. And I encourage that. If you have a goal, go for it. But that's where core values come in handy, because if you're using that as your roadmap, you're never going to revert back to old habits in which you were raised under, right? Or which were used to be a habit for you. I don't want to say raised under, because that's just in my terms, but I feel like core values can be those things like, are these things feeding me and my family and what I'm doing every day? And it keeps me in line for where I want to go. And I do feel like that makes the compass.
Yeah. I love it. I have Crack the Code to Parenting, my video course that's on my website that people can purchase. And it's a 6-week course, and it's literally a roadmap. And it takes you from the beginning of week 1 of understanding, what did I even envision being a parent? Like what is being a parent? You know, going back, I do this whole closed eye about helping people realize, like, you know, go back to the time when you were pregnant. Like, what did you envision this journey was going to be? And how is that working for you? Did it work out for you? Because like you, I was never going to be like my mom. And next thing you know, I'm yelling and I'm like my mom, you know? And I was like, oh gosh, you know, I swore that I was never going to be a single mom because I watched my mom do it as a single mom. And she didn't marry my stepdad until I was like in my 20s. You know, I mean, they dated forever since I was 16 on, but they got married like 10 years later. And I'm like, oh God, is that going to be me? And next thing you know, I'm divorced with 2 kids by myself. I'm like, oh my God, I'm my mom. Like, this is exactly what I didn't want. Right. And then on week 2, it's about letting go of your baggage. It's like letting go of, you feel, and I know this because it's how I raised my 2 boys. Like, I was not in a great state. I had no self-worth. I had no self-love. And so all my parenting came filtered through that. So I put that on my kids, who now are trying to learn their self-worth and self-love, because it definitely wasn't modeled by me at that time. You know, I will take full ownership of that, because I didn't know. I didn't know I could put down that baggage and parent through fresh eyes, you know, and understand, like, you know, I'm certified in the DISC. So I do a whole DISC in there, trying to figure out, like, what are our different personalities? How do we all communicate with our different personalities and stuff? And then in week 3, it's like learning the behaviors, like understanding like what aggressive behaviors look like, understanding why lying happens. It's, if we can understand that behavior is just a language. It's really an expression of a language of needs that need to be met by our children that aren't being met. So they're going to escalate in that way, you know. And then it's, you know, understanding how to see their weaknesses into their strengths. And that's what we don't do. We're constantly looking at what needs to be fixed, what needs to be better about our kids, where are they misbehaving, instead of saying, this is what you're really good at. You know, one thing I love about you is your heart.
Yeah.
So if this isn't working for you, how could you get it back into where you really love and you're really coming from a place of love, because that is your gift. So it's loving their weaknesses back into their strengths, you know. So and then week 5 is all about boundaries. You know, it's so funny because I work with so many clients, and the parents tell me, like, they're not listening and they're not doing this. And when I talk to the kids, I'm like, what are the rules? What are your boundaries? And they're like, my parents don't ever check on me. I mean, they say I have to be in bed at 11, but I don't go to bed till 2. I'm like, well, where's your parents? They're like, well, they're sleeping. You know, I'm not supposed to watch this show, but I watch it because my parents go to sleep and they don't ever check on me. Where's your phone? Well, I'm not supposed to have my phone in my room. We have a charging base. I'm like, well, is it ever there? They're like, oh, my parents don't care. Like, literally, this is what I hear from all of my clients. It's like, my parents don't care.
Yep.
And guess what that's translating to? Is my parents don't care.
Yeah.
Not that they don't care about that, but did they care about me? And I'll come back to the fact that my son, he's almost 25 now, but when he was like 19 or 20, somewhere like that, he's like, Mom, I want to tell you something. He's like, and don't get a big head about this, but I can now appreciate why you were so strict with me. Like, I realized you working so many jobs, you needed to know we were safe and you needed to keep us safe. And that was how you kept us safe. He's like, I still don't like the fact that you took my phone away or grounded us all the time. And I do appreciate that you were so strict with us, that you had these standards for us, because it made it, I look at it now and I realize how much you loved us. And isn't that the truth though? We put these boundaries on, and I explain it even in my videos about our house is our boundary. It's the place that we can come home, lock the door, know that, we're safe here away from the rest of the world. How are we giving that to our kids? And I bring it full circle back to the core values, because I think that's the foundation of creating the boundaries, creating the safety that not only we need as parents, but we need to give as our parents. Because one of the things that I teach the parents, because there's a lot of parent coaches, a lot of kid coaches. I do both because I feel like you can't do one without the other.
Right.
And one of the things I tell parents is, one of the questions is, do you have an open, safe, and trusting space for your child to communicate with you? And as much as I want to say, yes, I do, I don't. My child has a coach, because she needs that space where there's no judgment, because regardless, I'm still her mom. Regardless, she's going to tell me something. I'm going to be like, what? Wait, tell me that one more time. And she may take that as judgment when I'm taking it as playfulness. So it's really, and so when you talk about the core values, I'm thinking, wow. So if I had an underlining about having an open, safe, and trusting space, what values would have to meet that to create that?
That's so good.
Yeah.
It's something to think about for everybody. I love that.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
is your website up yet where the people can hear more about these core values and find out more about the core values? And, I know that you have workshops on this and stuff like that. So people that want to deep dive into core values now, hopefully you listeners are out there all over the world saying, yes, I need to know more about these core values. What's the website that's people can find this?
Yeah, so my website, it's about to have some updates added to it, but you can find me at thelindsayellis.com. And then if you want to go into like some values, then I definitely encourage, you can go to livemyvalues.com and kind of download my list of values for you to choose from. And I kind of walk you through how to do that.
I love it. I love it. And how do you make it fun? Because I know that that's really what kids want. Parents want outcomes, kids want fun. So how does this all tie together to have like a family fun night to create their values? Because I think that this is definitely possible.
For sure. Conversation. And when it comes down to the kids, and doing those, you can reach out to me. I don't have the family value workshop as a free download. But I do have these I'm getting these cards. They're currently in production made to where because sometimes having these cards, it actually does make it more fun to sort it. And then having conversations around it. Like I had my son, he's like a producer, he loves being in the spotlight. And so I had it on record. And so I was just interviewing him. So tell me about this. And he would tell me about, so I have it all on recording, and it was just so fun for us to all listen back to and for me to listen back to. But I really got to know him through that. He was literally in it telling me all this stuff. And we also make it a dinner time conversation. Say you don't have 2 hours to do this one night. It's like every night at dinner, try, or at family time where you guys are all together. I know a lot of families can't have dinner together every night with sports and all that good stuff. But, maybe right before you go to bed or whatever, have a moment and say, tell me about your value. Have a conversation once a day about it.
Right. I love it. I love it. Lindsay, thank you so much for being a part of our show tonight. It's really made a difference. I mean, even for myself, you got my brain going and going. And so I think that it's time that we sit down and go over our theme and really create these values for us. So thank you so much for being here, your time and your knowledge of this. It's been outstanding. If you're finding value in our conversation here on our show, please join our Redefine Parenting group on Facebook for even more tips and conversation. Do someone you know a favor and share my group with them as well, so they too can hear what they need to in order for them to feel supported in their parenting journey. It definitely takes a village. Also, my QR code is up for you guys to have a free download of my ebook called Teach Your Children That They're Enough. Thank you so much for joining our conversation tonight. Again, together we can give kids a childhood they won't have to heal from. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.